Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everybody, whether you're joining us here in the room or whether you are streaming this live or whether you're watching the recording at some point in the future. Assalamu alaikum. And it's already been 9 sessions now, so time is really flying by. Alhamdulillah, we've covered over 20, 25, or almost now we're going into over 25 names, and we're a quarter of the way through. It's just things are get just piling by and flying by, but alhamdulillah, I hope that this experience has been blessed and hope that you've been enjoying as we've not just been reflecting over these names, but also seeing where we can recognize these names within the world around us, within ourselves. And so I hope that this experience has been a holistic one that doesn't just limit these names or Allah to a prayer mat or to a prayer time or to between the lines of a book, that it helps show us where Allah is in all the world around us and in the creation that is around. And so last time we covered the names Al-Khafid, Al-Rafi, and Al-Mu'iz. Al-Khafid, of course, was translated as the one who lowers, the one who reduces, the one who brings down. And Ar-Rafi was the exalter, the one who raises, the one who lifts up. And Al-Mu'iz was the honorer, the one who gives honor. And we mentioned that as Al-Khafid is complementary with Ar-Rafi, even though they seem like they're opposite, that there's lowering and there's raising, this is actually a complement, not so much a diametric opposition. That Al-Mu'iz has its complement as well in Al-Mudhil, who is in the opposite, the dishonorer, the humiliator. And we'll actually talk about Al-Mudhil today. But the takeaway from last session, yesterday, was that the exalter, the lowerer, the honorer, these names give us a call to go into our state of mind, and just know that when we are going through something that may bring us closer to our God, or may bring us further from our God, Allah at the end of the day is the one that is responsible for everything, that is there for everything that occurs. But Allah, in the name of Al-Khafid, will lower us in those moments where we may be most separated from Allah. We might be at the top of our world. We might be doing really successful. We might be doing really well, but we may be really separated from Allah. And the opposite might be true as well. We might be at the lowest of our low and feeling separated from Allah. And this lower really helps peel away all those different things that we are tied to or attached to or preoccupied with, to show us that Allah is there. And same thing with the exalter, that Allah raises us up, that whether we're in the depths of any kind of struggle or any kind of just moment of really anxiety, anguish, that Allah helps raise us and relieves that anxiety. But also the flip side as well, that if we are doing really well, Allah will continue to help us if we are there with great intentions. And Al-Mu'iz, that honor, comes with a similar connotation, that honor is not just one that is bestowed in the sense that like we might be honored at a ceremony, or we might be honored for our contributions, but a holistic kind of honoring, an honoring that really honors our humanity before anything else than our human value. So the last thing of these three names being that, as in the case with any name, when we translate these names, we often attach just a definition to it, but understanding that lowering, exalting, honoring, dishonoring, raising, making, reducing, these are all we have certain connotations to that because of the realm that we in, because of the world that we live in. These have specific connotations. So we are mindful to know that these have such a rich connotation and meaning that covers the physical, mental, spiritual, mind, body, soul. These elements all are covered in these attributes. So when Allah exalts, it's not just maybe a literal exalting. It's an exalting that lifts up your mind, your body, your soul. It's one that touches deep beneath. So just keeping in mind that These, we may look at these and it's like, why would Allah do this? Why would Allah do that? But it's a holistic thing that allows us to ultimately come closer to Allah. Now, with that being said, we'll go into the Asma al-Husna, the 99 names recitation as always. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Bismillah. And of course, as always, you're welcome to join along as you are comfortable, and or just to yourself. But inshallah, we're getting the tune of it as we start our mornings with the Asma al-Husna. And like I said, we're already over a quarter of the way there. So inshallah, we will have the full 99 done within no time here. So Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم المالك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق الباري المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير الحكم العدل اللطيف الخبير الحليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيت الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد الباعث الشهيد الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحصي مبدي المعيد المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الأحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي المتعالي البر التواب المنتقم العفو الرؤوف المالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقسط الجامع الغني المغني المانع الضار نافع النور هذه البديع الباقي الوارث الرشيد الصبور. And just as a friendly reminder, we will be having a few guests come and do the recitation of the 99 names. So inshallah, better days are ahead. But bismillah, it'll be a blessed opportunity for us and for them, and for just to really get to hear these names from different people, from people who actually have great voices, but also just to really there's just something that comes about when a different person and other people recite these 99 names. There's some things open up, and so inshallah, that's a way to keep you guys coming, but also a way to help these sessions just become more immersive there, inshallah. So as we jump into our names today, as mentioned, today we'll cover Al-Mudhil, which was the complement of Al-Mu'iz, but we're also covering As-Samee. We're also covering Al-Basir. So As-Samee is the one who hears, the all-hearing, the listener. Al-Basir is the one, the all-seeing, the one who sees everything. So with that, let's go ahead and let's jump into Al-Mudhil. So Al-Mudhil, the root, as I mentioned, the translation of Al-Mudhil is the one who humiliates. And it has roots in connotating to be low, to lower, to debase, to degrade, to humble, to humiliate, to break, to conquer and disgrace, shame, humiliation. So a lot of like really, really tough words here to take in as this meaning. It takes al-Mudhil, as I mentioned, is a direct complement to al-Muiz. So when we think of Allah as the one humiliating or the one who humiliates, it's not just Allah who is the one. It's not just humiliation that Allah is doing, but it's part of this honoring and dishonoring. It's held in balance, and it takes us to these deepest places where our ego, really that outward ego, and that ego that we feel is internal, but it really actually is a cover for what's our true internal spirit. It feels worthless, and it really identifies itself with this self abasement. It starts to see that, this humiliation. But I want to be sure and clear to mention that when we think of humiliation in our worldly context, we might think of, just an embarrassing moment. We might think of somebody making fun of us back in like school. We might think of just like that incident where somebody will legitimately pick on us, or something will happen to us where we feel completely humiliated and we feel shamed and we feel made fun of, and they just completely lost there. And the humiliation that is being talked about here with al-Mudhil is not one that is just there to make fun of you, or just there just because Allah gets a kick out of it, that of you being lowered or anything. It's a humiliation that is one that it comes from a place of recognition, one from a place that helps peel back some of the layers that have come in terms of maybe holding you back from Allah. It's a humiliation that's designed to really purify. So we've used this metaphor in several different occasions, and we used it yesterday in the quote that was mentioned to Al-Hasan al-Basri, the Tabi, the successor in the successive generations to the Prophet ﷺ, that when we were talking about dhikr, and that dhikr in and of itself is a he said soft. Somebody had said that, I have a hardness in my heart, and Hassan al-Basri said, well, you can soften it with dhikr, with the remembrance of Allah. And the more forgetful the heart is, the harder it becomes. But if a person does remember Allah, that hardness softens as copper melts in a fire. So we've heard this kind of fire being able to melt iron or purify iron, but in that melting it purifies it. That's kind of how you get that incense. So we go through a kind of burning that helps remove some of those impurities away from us, but it sometimes does feel uncomfortable, and this name is not to make you feel completely ashamed, or that Allah is picking on you, or any of those feelings you get when we have our traditional connotation of humiliation. It's like I mentioned, when you look at any of the names of Allah, we automatically look at it from a perspective that this means this in my frame of mind. This is what this means in our frame of mind. So when I talk about exalting, when I talk about raising, when we talk about lowering, when we talk about honor, we do those from the connotations and the framework of that being within our human realm. But we also understand that Allah operates on so many other realms. So this honoring or this humiliation, this dishonoring, is not just one that we may associate within our framework in a limited sense. It's one that touches base deep in the spirituality, but it makes you maybe feel that sense of just humiliation, because you're like, what have I done? Like, why have I created this distance? And not so much, a continued self-abasement of just like, I'm like all this, I'm this, and my self-esteem continues to low. No, it's supposed to be a reflective type that kind of shakes you up and brings you out. And so this name, obviously, though, is a hard one. It leads us to those abysses, to those trenches where we really fall on our knees and we just put our head down, and we're just really feeling useless. We feel weak, and we feel rejected by those around us. We feel just all alone. And we come to realize in those moments that our true selves, where they are beyond the limited representations from the human context. So like we might think that, oh, I was this person and people love me for my wealth, people love me for this, people love me for that. And when we lose all that, we think that we're not that person anymore, that we're not worthy of living anymore. And we get to that point right there. I'll lift up two quick examples from the Islamic tradition, and actually, one shared within in the biblical tradition. But the example of Ayub alayhi salam, of Job alayhi salam, a prophet who had immense wealth, who had immense family, who had property, all these things, and these things being utterly taken away, being afflicted with disease, being afflicted with so many things to where he was literally just at, hanging on by a string. But even in that moment, in terms of kind of discerning why has this all happened, knowing that keeping patience in Allah was what was the purpose of this, was kind of holding on to that rope, and Allah lifting that up in the Quran. And similarly for Maryam alayhi salam, that when Maryam was at the pangs of birth, having the pangs of birth, she was under a date tree, and as she's there, she's like, how I wish I was never born. Like, Maryam alayhi salam just, saying that, how I wish I was never born. She had already been visited by the angel. She had already been told what the purpose was, but she had been like, how I wish I was never born. Because she knows she would go through ostracization by her tribe or by her village and by her family members and so many things. But just in that moment when Allah comes and comforts that person, when Allah lifts up that person's strengths, that it frees them from that limited representation that they might have. For Maryam, it may have been that how will the world see me? How will the people see me? For Ayub, it may have been that, am I anything beyond like what I've kind of built up here? And so Allah kind of showing us how our true selves and our more significant selves, our patience is what gets us, is what defines us, not our wealth. Our resilience is what defines us, not our place in society or what we look like. And so, as I mentioned, this is complementary, not opposed to al-Mu'iz, the honorer. There's an analogy that was made, and I mentioned we go off of this book, Divine Names by Rosina Fozia Al-Rawi. So a lot of these stories and these little tidbits and gems come from this book, so in case you're interested in that. But there's an analogy that Rosina makes about Al-Mudhil, that Al-Mudhil tears open the limitations of the puddle that we think we are, and lets the water of that puddle be touched by the water of the ocean. And soaked in the ocean, we then not only free ourselves from the previous chains and constrictions, but also the corruptions that gather in a puddle. How often do you take a look at a puddle and it reminds you of like Santorini, or it reminds you of like blue Caribbean waters and just like the purest water? You look at a puddle, it's muddy, it's there. So touching that with the ocean and allowing you to remove the pollution and removing all that, and it becomes then your water, the purity becomes stable from that ebb and flow that comes. The divine comes, washes it away, purifies it, but also just lifts that up and really gives you a new space, but makes you a part of that whole. And as Rosina mentioned, that wisdom often comes from a part in ourselves which we don't value or accept. We don't think of the places at the least that we might be at as things that lift us up. And so we think about, where does wisdom come from? So we might find ourselves doing something that we don't want, and only because it is required and demanded of us, or because that we must do it to feel accepted, loved, or belong. And this can lead us to a sense of, not just an inner weakness, but a feeling of inner fracture. And we begin to then taste that part of that quality of al-Mudhil when we feel that we're not doing something right. We feel these hints of it. We feel that we need to change something, and we need to really acknowledge our depths. And as we know, is that from the names before, we must acknowledge and really develop the depths of ourselves before we can rise to the heights of our true being. We need to recognize where we have our shortcomings, where we do fall, because Allah is there to help show us the next step in it. In our humiliation is not our end. In these things are not a close. These are a means for us to advance to the next stage. So inshallah, we learn that from this humiliation, it's not a humiliation that we are just being trashed on, or we're just being just made a pariah, but that we are being given an opportunity to really cleanse our heart and reflect, and from those deepest parts of ourselves that we are uncomfortable with, we derive that wisdom, that how we can become better people. Inshallah. The next name is As-Samee. As-Samee is the one who hears, the all-hearing, the listener. So we've touched upon this name in maybe in connotation to Al-Muhaymin, in terms of the watchful, but As-Samee specifically concerns hearing all the sounds without limitation, silent or loud, separate or joined, and hears every creations, every prayer, sound, movement, without fail. A verse of the Quran that touches upon this is that not a leaf drops, but that Allah knows it. So, there's just this kind of this hearing that stems from the root meaning of this word of not just hearing, but listening, deep listening, to pay attention, to hear someone out, and not just to like be aware that, hey, I heard a tree fall in the forest, but in fact, it was this tree that fell here at this time, at this place. So having a really deep tie to what all is connected there. And, hearing from the divine opens us up to the path to the soul and to the invisible, unlike any other sense. And through Samee, Allah enables us to have the capacity to hear signs and symbols in everything around us. And every sound, every rhythm then takes on a holy and healing quality. I mentioned last time I did a nikah for a couple, and the topic of it was the signs of life's journey, that we're on kind of a highway, and each sign that we go by is a reminder of our creator, of our destination, that is Allah. But sometimes we miss those signs as we're driving in on I-35. Allah knows that I've missed how many signs in the past, even though it's a straight shot, but still it's just like, you ignore a lot of these signs. You ignore the construction signs, you ignore the signs that say, hey, road closed. You ignore all these different signs. But once you start to listen, not so much with your ears, but with your heart, you start to open up to a new world that sees all of these things as reminders and divine reminders. So we listen and we welcome all of life so that we might become free from the world of our own kind of limited understanding. We expand ourselves there. And when we understand the essence of the things in our heart, we begin to have a capacity to hear without ears, to see without eyes, and to speak without our tongue. Our heart becomes all of those things. Our heart becomes the way which we see, which we hear, which we perceive, and which we, before we even talk, we are able to just kind of elucidate what we're about to say, in the sense that it's just all contained from a pure point. And so people who can listen and open up their heart to others are really given a great maturity, because nothing like touches another human, and nothing feels better in many instances for another human than to really be felt than the feeling of being heard. So really being heard, just think about times when someone really heard you out and not just said, oh, LOL, that's cool, or like, hey, that sounds good, but really sat and like listened and valued you for what you had to say. And now amplify that feeling to every single thing that you can imagine. That's how Allah really operates with the creation. That's not just a thing like, oh, something falls, this happens, because there's so many sounds and things going on in the creation, but to know, to be aware and cognizant of what's going on. And so this on a symbolic level, we had mentioned this in the spiritual connections group a few weeks ago, but on a symbolic level, the hearing is connected with the throat, and the throat is then connected with truthfulness, and the throat is the bridge between the mind and the heart. And we open to divine truth. We make space for the union of the divine and our world. When we open up our hearing, we open up a connection to our heart. And so there's so much intricacy that lies there when you just sit and have deep listening. When you reflect with that's around you, and when you pay attention to what all is around you, you really start to open up your heart. So we've talked about how we purify our heart, but this is one that how do we open up our heart? Because sometimes our hearts can get hardened based on what we hear. It might not be the most pleasant, it might not be something that we're wanting to hear out, but it helps us there. And when we think about this name, it's hearing, but as with many other names, it's connected to another name. It's complemented with the name of Al-Basir, the seeing, the all-seeing, in that they both help us on our way to that inner wisdom, that outer balance, and that inner purification and inner opening. And Al-Basir, as I mentioned here, as we close out with this final name, Al-Basir is the all-seeing, the one who sees everything as a whole while not missing a slight detail, not without fail, and without fail, and sees the visible and invisible, the manifest and non-manifest. And Al-Basir really helps serve not just that physical aspect of seeing, because when I say seeing, when I say hearing, we automatically go to the sensory aspects of our bodies. We don't think about what our heart or what our spiritual seeing is, our spiritual hearing. But al-basir serves our spiritual development as much as it does the physical, in that we might develop the vision of our heart, in that we might be receptive to the light that is manifest in all that is around us, not just the physical light that we can see here, but the light that really is manifested everywhere. And so that inner sight then complements our outward sight. How we see people on the outside is complemented with how we really see them for who they are, in the sense that they are from a divine creation. So it balances these things out. So we see through the eye of the heart, and it completes that outer sight, and we perceive from the inside without these senses. This is from our heart. This is without judgment, but this is allows us to see people with a purified lens, not so much the one that we just judge people from the outside. And so all human virtues are really connected with this knowledge, this awareness, this perception. And so as we start to build up and grow on these aspects, and to know and to get to know people and be aware, we then reflect that in our character. We then reflect that in our behavior. So the better we see people around us, the better way we look at people around us, the better it reflects on us. If we see people with a sense of suspicion, if we see people with just in terms of not regarding their humanity, it reflects on us and what we value in our virtues. So we want to lift that up so that we may be lifted up. And we act and we serve Allah with this name as if we could see Allah, because if you can't, verily Allah can see you. And this is a verse from the Quran, that act and serve Allah as if you could see Allah, because if you can't, verily He can see you. So if you are doing everything as if Allah is watching, it's not meant to be that you're living under NSA surveillance, and just someone's just watching outside your apartment with like a van and a satellite dish on. But it is that sense that, am I being the best person I can be? And al-Basir helps reaffirm that hey, you can do better. You can do better. Allah will be there when you slip. Allah will be there when you're in your worst moments, but Allah will be there when you can not only be better, but are better. And so this just inspires us to think about how much better can we be if we know we've got a set of eyes on us, if we know that we've got the divine eyes that are not just there to judge us, but to help us get to that point. And so as was mentioned, the root of this word really or this root of this divine name really concerns that sight, but sight of the heart, to really to look, to realize, to understand, to comprehend, to grasp, to enlighten, to inform. So you see, there's the all-seeing, but there's a process that comes with all of that. And so we think, when we look at the seeing, the hearing, the humiliation, we look at this not so much just from the literal sense, but we look at it for what does it say about our spiritual, and what does it challenge us to be. When we improve our sight, we can see the world for really what it is in the divine creation, and we see the beauty there, and it reflects on us. When we hear for beyond our physical hearing, but we listen, really practice deep listening with that which is around us, we see the divine around us, we see the humanity and the beauty of people in and of itself. And then when we feel humiliated, we don't feel that Allah is just making fun of us or shaming us, but Allah is bringing us to a place where we can really find places to be uplifted, where we can really become polished and become better. So inshallah, with that, we conclude with our dhikr. And just as we did last time, we will do a recitation of the Asma al-Husna just to close out here, and we'll just keep doing that as we go. But Bismillah, let us start with this dhikr, inshallah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Allah, Allah, Allah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Allah, Allah, Allah. Al-Mudhil, 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 Al-Mudhil. المذل 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 يا مذل 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 لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله 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 الله
السميع 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 يا سميع 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 لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله 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 البصير 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 يا بصير 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 لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله 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 الله. So let's go ahead and we share our screen here. And we'll one time, real quick, we'll do the Asma al Husna. Inshallah, we'll part there and put a pause on the conversation till tomorrow, inshallah. But Bismillah, let's begin here. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم المالك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرازق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير الحكم العدل اللطيف الخبير الحليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيت الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد الباعث الشهيد الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحصي مبدي المعيد المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الأحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي المتعالي البر التواب المنتقم العفو الرؤوف مالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقسط الجامع الغني المغني المانع الضار نافع النور الهادي البديع الباقي الوارث الرشيد الصبور. Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters, for watching, for attending. Inshallah, we will see you tomorrow. We really appreciate you coming out and have a blessed day and blessed continuation of Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.